The lecture hall aboard the Galactic Academy station was filled with young cadets from dozens of species. They sat in rows that curved upward like the inside of a great bowl, their eyes and other sensory organs all fixed on the old Vrellan instructor who stood at the center. Instructor Kethvor was ancient by any standard. His gray scales had lost their shine many cycles ago, and his 4 arms moved slowly now, but his mind remained sharp. He had fought in 3 major wars and lived to teach others about what he had seen. "Today," Kethvor said, his voice carried by the room's amplifiers, "we will discuss why certain species are considered more dangerous in combat than others." A young Tessari raised one of her feathered limbs. "Instructor, is this about the Terrans again?" A wave of nervous sounds passed through the room. Some students shifted in their seats. Others made the equivalent of eye contact with each other. Kethvor made a sound that was almost a laugh. "You are correct, Cadet Scylla. It is always eventually about the Terrans." He touched a control panel, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a planet covered in blue water and green and brown land masses. White clouds swirled across its surface. "This is Earth," Kethvor said, "the homeworld of the Terran species. When the Galactic Council first made contact with them, our scientists classified their world as a Category 7 death planet." Several students made sounds of surprise. A Drenian cadet near the front raised his trunk-like appendage. "Instructor, Category 7 is near the highest rating. How did any intelligent life evolve there?" "That is exactly the question we must explore to understand why Terran warriors fight the way they do," Kethvor replied. He touched his controls again, and the image changed. Now it showed a timeline of Earth's history. Images flashed by showing mass extinction events, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. "In its history, Earth has experienced 5 major extinction events," the instructor explained. "Events that killed most life on the planet, and yet life continued. It adapted, it changed, and eventually it produced the Terrans." The image changed again to show ancient humans. They were small, thin creatures with no claws, no armor, no venom. They looked weak and helpless compared to most species in the galaxy. "Look at them," Kethvor said. "No natural weapons, thin skin that offers no protection, slow compared to their world's predators, poor senses of smell and hearing. By all logic, they should have gone extinct." "So how did they survive?" asked a Meloran cadet, her bioluminescent patches flickering with curiosity. "They survived because they had no choice but to fight," Kethvor said. "They were prey animals who refused to accept their role in the food chain. They were cornered from the moment they first walked upright on the plains of their birth continent." He showed images of early humans facing lions, hyenas, and other predators. Other species on their world could run faster, bite harder, see better in darkness. The Terrans could do none of these things, so they learned to think, to plan, to work together, and most importantly, to never ever give up. The instructor paused and looked around the room at his students. "This is what you must understand about Terran psychology. They do not have a surrender instinct. Other species, when they are clearly defeated, will submit to save their lives. This is logical, this is sensible, but Terrans do not do this." "Because they were never given that option on their homeworld," said a quiet voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look. Sitting in the shadows of the highest row was a figure that most of the cadets had not noticed until now. He was Terran, with brown skin and dark eyes that reflected the light from the holographic display. "Cadet Marcus Chen," Kethvor said with something like respect in his voice. "I was wondering when you would speak." Marcus stood and walked down the curved steps toward the center of the room. He moved smoothly, like water flowing over rocks, and the other cadets pulled back slightly as he passed them. "My instructor is correct," Marcus said when he reached the floor. "On Earth, surrender was not an option. If a predator caught you, you died. There was no negotiation, no mercy, so our ancestors learned to fight back even when there was no hope of winning. He looked around at the various alien faces watching him. I know what many of you think of Terrans. You call us violent, aggressive, dangerous, and you are not wrong, but you do not understand why we are this way. Marcus touched the control panel, and the image changed to show a human child facing a large carnivore. On Earth, even our young ones will fight back when cornered, not because they think they can win, but because fighting is in our blood. It is how we survived long enough to become what we are today. The Tessari cadet Scylla raised her feathered limb again. But surely now that you have technology, you do not need to fight this way anymore. Marcus smiled, but there was something hard in his eyes. Our technology came from that same drive to survive. We invented weapons because we needed them. We built ships that could cross the stars because we had already crossed the most dangerous planet in this sector of the galaxy. Kethvor stepped forward again. This brings me to the lesson I wanted to teach today. In the last war against the Kethvori supremacy, the Terrans showed the galaxy what cornered animals can do. The image changed to show a space battle. Terran ships, smaller and less advanced than their enemies, fought against overwhelming odds. Several students made sounds of distress as they watched ship after ship be destroyed. The Battle of Proxima Station, Kethvor said quietly. 3,000 Terran soldiers against a fleet of 50,000 Kethvori warriors. By all calculations, the Terrans should have surrendered. They should have negotiated. They had no chance of victory. On the screen, the last few Terran ships continued to fight, even as they burned. They did not surrender, the instructor said. They fought until every ship was destroyed, and in doing so, they delayed the enemy fleet long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Those 3,000 Terrans saved the lives of millions. They all died, said the Drenian cadet, his voice full of confusion. How is that a victory? Marcus answered before the instructor could speak. Because for a Terran, there are things worse than death. Running away while your people are in danger is one of them. He touched the control panel one more time, and the image changed to show a monument. It was a simple stone structure with 3,000 names carved into its surface. Every Terran child learns these names, Marcus said. We learn that when there is no way out, you make one. When retreat is impossible, you advance. And when death is certain, you make the enemy pay for every breath they take from you. The lecture hall was silent. Even Kethvor seemed affected by the Terran's words. Tomorrow, the instructor finally said, we will begin tactical simulations based on Terran combat doctrine. I suggest you all rest well tonight. You will need your strength. As the students filed out of the hall, many of them looked at Marcus Chen with new eyes. He was no longer just another cadet. He was a reminder of something that the galaxy had learned the hard way. Terrans were not dangerous because they were strong. They were dangerous because they did not know how to stop fighting. 3 standard months later, the Galactic Academy station received a distress signal that would test everything the cadets had learned. An unknown enemy fleet had appeared at the edge of the system, and they were heading directly for the station. Commander Vreltosh, the station's military leader, stood in the command center and watched the tactical display with growing concern. Her 4 eyes moved independently, tracking different parts of the incoming fleet. How many ships? She asked. 47 confirmed, replied her sensor officer, a young Meloran whose bioluminescent patches were pulsing with stress. They match no known configuration in our databases. Origin unknown. Response time for the nearest military fleet. 8 standard hours minimum, Commander. Vreltosh felt her secondary hearts begin to beat faster. The station had defensive capabilities, but nothing that could stand against 47 warships. And there were over 10,000 people aboard, most of them students and instructors. Begin evacuation procedures, she ordered. All non-essential personnel to the escape shuttles. Commander, another officer spoke up. Their ships are moving to intercept positions. They are blocking the primary escape routes. This was not a random attack, Vreltosh realized. This was a deliberate trap. Someone wanted the station and everyone on it. Open a communication channel, she said. Let us find out what they want. The main screen flickered and a face appeared. It was not a species that any of them recognized. The creature had pale, stretched skin over a skull that seemed too large for its thin neck. Its eyes were black and empty, like holes in space itself. Galactic Academy Station, the creature spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. You have something we want. Surrender it to us, and you will be permitted to live. I am Commander Vreltosh. What is it you seek? The Terran, the creature said. Give us the Terran called Marcus Chen, and we will leave your station intact. Vreltosh felt confusion mix with her fear. Why would anyone want a single cadet badly enough to bring a war fleet? I need to understand, she said carefully. Why do you want this individual? The creature's empty eyes seemed to look through the screen and into her soul. The Terrans destroyed our home. They burned our worlds. They scattered our people across the void. We have traveled far to find one of their kind. We will have our revenge. The communication ended abruptly, and Vreltosh was left staring at a blank screen. She had heard stories about the Terrans' wars, of course. Everyone had. But she had never considered that there might be enemies from those wars still seeking vengeance. Commander, her tactical officer said, they are charging weapons. Vreltosh made her decision quickly. She touched the station-wide communication control. All cadets and staff, this is Commander Vreltosh. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. All combat-trained personnel report to defensive positions immediately. This is not a drill. As she gave the order, she wondered if she was sending children to their deaths. Many of the cadets were barely adults by their species standards, but she had no other choice. In his quarters, Marcus Chen heard the announcement and felt something cold settle in his chest. He did not know who these attackers were, but he knew they had come for him. He could turn himself over. It would save thousands of lives. But even as the thought crossed his mind, another part of him rejected it completely. Terrans did not surrender. They did not negotiate with enemies who pointed weapons at innocent people. His ancestors had not built humanity's future by giving in to predators, and he would not betray that legacy now. He pulled on his combat suit and grabbed his weapons. Then he headed for the command center. Whatever was coming, he would face it on his feet, fighting until his last breath. Just like a cornered animal. The first wave of enemy shuttles reached the station 20 minutes after the demand for surrender was rejected. They cut through the outer hull at multiple points, and soldiers in strange black armor poured into the corridors. Marcus was part of the defense team assigned to protect the main reactor. If the enemy took control of the power systems, the entire station would be helpless. He stood with 6 other cadets, a mix of species who had all trained together over the past months. Remember what we learned, Marcus said as they heard the sounds of fighting grow closer. They have numbers, we have preparation, we know these corridors, they do not. Scylla, the Tessari who had questioned him in the lecture hall months ago, checked her weapon with trembling feathered limbs. Marcus, they came here for you. Should you not stay hidden? They came here for a Terran, Marcus replied. I am going to show them exactly what that means. The first enemy soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. They moved in tight formation, their weapons raised and ready. Marcus counted 12 of them before he stopped counting and started shooting. The fight was brief and brutal. 3 of the cadets went down in the first exchange of fire, and Marcus felt hot anger burn through his chest as he watched them fall. But he did not let the anger control him. He channeled it, used it to make his hands steady and his aim true. When the last enemy soldier fell, Marcus checked on his fallen teammates. 2 were dead. The third, A Drenian named Kor was badly wounded but alive. "Get him to medical," Marcus told the survivors. "I will hold this position." "Alone?" Scylla asked, her voice high with disbelief. Marcus looked at her with eyes that had grown hard. "When I was a child on Earth, my grandfather told me a story. He said that our ancestors used to hunt animals much larger than themselves. They would chase them for days, never stopping, never resting. Most prey animals could run faster than humans, but they could not run forever. We could. We wore them down with our persistence." He turned back to face the corridor where more enemies would soon appear. "These invaders think they have cornered us. They are wrong. They have cornered themselves on this station with a Terran. And I do not get tired. I do not give up. I will fight until there is no more fighting left to do." Scylla wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's voice stopped her. She had seen him train over the past months. She had seen him push himself past limits that would break most species. And she had heard the stories about what Terrans could do when they had nothing left to lose. "Good luck," she said, and helped carry Kor toward the medical bay. Marcus stood alone in the corridor and waited. The emergency lights painted everything in shades of red, and distant explosions made the floor tremble beneath his feet. He thought about his family back on Earth, wondered if they would ever know how he died. Then he pushed those thoughts away. There would be time for thinking later. Now was the time for fighting. The next wave came, and Marcus met them with everything he had. In the command center, Commander Vreltosh watched the situation grow worse with each passing minute. The enemy had established multiple footholds throughout the station, and her defenders were being pushed back on every front. "Casualties?" she asked. 73 confirmed dead," her tactical officer replied. "Over 200 wounded. We are losing ground." Instructor Kethvor stood nearby, his old scales dark with stress. He had taken command of the cadet forces, organizing them into effective fighting units despite their lack of experience. But even his decades of military knowledge could not overcome the simple mathematics of the situation. They were outnumbered and outgunned. "The reactor section is still secure," someone reported. "Cadet Chen is holding the main corridor." "Alone?" Kethvor asked sharply. His team suffered casualties. He ordered the survivors to evacuate the wounded. He has been fighting alone for the past 40 minutes. Kethvor made a sound that might have been admiration or despair. "Show me." The main screen switched to a security feed from the reactor section. What they saw made even the battle-hardened instructor pause. The corridor was filled with enemy bodies. They lay in piles, some on top of others, as if they had climbed over their fallen comrades to reach the single figure at the end of the passage. Marcus Chen stood there, covered in blood and burns, his weapon raised and ready for the next attack. "How many?" Vreltosh whispered. "Our count shows 47 enemy soldiers have entered that corridor since the fighting began," her officer said. "None have passed through." The commander looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel to the enemy flagship," she ordered. The pale-faced creature appeared on screen again, its black eyes holding what might have been amusement. "Have you decided to surrender the Terran?" "No," Vreltosh said. "I have decided to show you something." She transmitted the security feed from the reactor corridor. On the screen, the creature watched Marcus fight off another group of attackers. 4 enemies entered the frame. None of them left it. "You came here seeking revenge against the Terrans," Vreltosh said. "You traveled across the galaxy to punish them for what they did to your people, but you made a mistake. You thought that because there was only one Terran here, he would be easy to capture. You were wrong." The creature's expression did not change, but something flickered in those empty black eyes. "That single Terran has killed more of your soldiers than our entire defense force," the commander continued. "He has been fighting for nearly an hour without rest. He will continue fighting until you kill him, and killing him will cost you more lives than you can afford to lose." She leaned forward, her 4 eyes fixed on the creature's face. "This is what the Terrans are. This is why the galaxy fears them, not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of what is inside them. They are survivors. They fight like cornered animals because that is the only way they know how to exist." The creature stared at the security feed for a long moment. On screen, Marcus dropped an empty weapon and picked up another from a fallen enemy. His face showed no fear, no hesitation, only a cold determination to keep fighting. "We will return," the creature finally said. "With more ships, more soldiers, we will have our revenge." "Then you will face more Terrans," Vreltosh replied. "And they will show you the same welcome that this one has shown your soldiers. Think carefully about whether revenge is worth that price." The communication ended, and everyone in the command center held their breath. On the tactical display, the enemy ships began to move. They pulled back from the station, one by one, until the last of them jumped to faster-than-light speeds and disappeared. A great sigh of relief passed through the room, but Vreltosh did not celebrate. She opened a channel to the reactor section. "Cadet Chen," she said, "the enemy is retreating. You can stand down." For a long moment there was no response. Then Marcus's voice came through, hoarse and exhausted. "Are you certain, Commander? It could be a trick." "Our sensors confirm it. They are gone." On the security feed, they watched Marcus lower his weapon. He looked at the bodies that surrounded him, and something crossed his face that none of them could read. Then he sat down with his back against the wall, and he began to laugh. It was a strange sound, that laughter. There was no joy in it. It was the sound of a human who had been pushed to the edge of death and had somehow survived, the sound of a predator who had defended his territory against impossible odds. Instructor Kethvor watched the screen and understood something he had been trying to teach for decades. Words and lessons and simulations could only go so far. To truly understand the Terrans, you had to see them fight. Not for glory or conquest, but for survival, because that was all they knew, that was all they had ever known. The aftermath of the battle took weeks to sort through. Bodies had to be identified and returned to families. The station needed repairs that would take months to complete, and someone had to explain to the Galactic Council why an unknown enemy species had attacked one of their most important educational facilities. Marcus spent 3 days in the medical bay, recovering from his wounds. The doctors were amazed that he had survived at all, much less continued fighting for as long as he did. His body had been running on pure adrenaline and willpower by the end. On the 4th day, Instructor Kethvor came to visit him. The old Vrelin sat in a chair beside Marcus's bed and studied the young Terran with new eyes. He had taught thousands of students over his long career, warriors from dozens of species who had gone on to fight in every corner of the galaxy. But he had never seen anything quite like what Marcus had done. "The Council has reviewed the security footage," Kethvor said. "They have a proposal for you." Marcus was sitting up in bed, his wounds bandaged but healing quickly. Terrans had always been fast healers, another legacy of their violent homeworld. "What kind of proposal?" "They want to create a new training program based on Terran combat doctrine. They want you to help design it." Marcus considered this for a moment. "Why me? There are more experienced Terran soldiers who would be better choices." "Because of what you said during the battle," Kethvor replied. "Commander Vreltosh told me about her conversation with the enemy leader. She said she realized something important while watching you fight." "What was that?" The instructor leaned forward. "She realized that Terran psychology cannot be taught through lectures and simulations alone. It must be demonstrated. Other species need to see what Terrans are capable of when pushed to their limits. They need to understand in their bones why the galaxy should be grateful that humanity chose to be our allies instead of our enemies." Marcus was quiet for a long time. He thought about the battle, about the 47 enemies he had killed to protect the reactor. He did not feel proud of what he had done. He felt tired, empty, but also, somewhere deep inside, he felt a spark of understanding. My grandfather used to say that humans were never the strongest animals on Earth, Marcus finally said. We were not the fastest or the deadliest, but we were the most stubborn. We simply refused to die, no matter what the universe threw at us. He looked at Kethvor with eyes that held centuries of human history. That is what made us dangerous, not our weapons or our rage, but our refusal to accept defeat. Our ancestors faced extinction over and over again, and every time they found a way to survive. And you think you can teach this to other species? The instructor asked. No, Marcus admitted. I do not think it can be taught, but I can show them what it looks like. I can demonstrate what happens when someone fights not for victory but for survival, and maybe, if they see it enough times, they will begin to understand. Kethvor nodded slowly. This was what he had suspected, and he was glad the young Terran understood it too. There is one more thing, the instructor said. The enemy who attacked us. We have identified them from old records. They call themselves the Void Speakers. Centuries ago, during the early days of human expansion, they tried to destroy a Terran colony. The Terrans fought back. They pushed the Void Speakers to the edge of extinction. Marcus closed his eyes. More history, more blood. The price of humanity's survival was measured in the suffering of others, whether friends or enemies. They will return, he said. It was not a question. Eventually, perhaps with allies, perhaps with better weapons. The galaxy is large, and there are many who fear or hate the Terrans for what they have done in the past. Then we will face them, Marcus said. That is what we do. That is all we have ever done. He opened his eyes and looked at the old instructor. For a moment, Kethvor saw something ancient in those eyes, something that had been forged in the fires of a death world, tempered by millions of years of struggle and survival. The Void Speakers think they understand vengeance, Marcus said quietly. They think they know what it means to hate an enemy so deeply that you would travel across the galaxy to destroy them, but they do not understand what they are dealing with. He sat up straighter, ignoring the pain from his wounds. Humans have been fighting for survival since before we could speak. Every generation faced extinction, and every generation refused to die. That is our legacy. That is what flows through our blood. Marcus's voice grew harder, and Kethvor felt the temperature in the room seem to drop. The Void Speakers want to see what cornered animals can do. Fine. Let them come. Let them bring their fleets and their soldiers and their hatred. They will learn the same lesson that every predator on Earth learned. He smiled, and there was nothing friendly in the expression. Humans do not stay cornered for long. Sooner or later we find a way out, and when we do, the things that cornered us pay the price. Kethvor stood up from his chair. He had heard enough. He understood now why the Galactic Council was right to fear the Terrans and right to want them as allies. Rest and recover, the instructor said. When you are ready, we have much work to do. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. For what it is worth, Cadet Chen, I am glad you are on our side. Marcus lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning their revenge. Somewhere out there, new threats were emerging that the galaxy had not yet imagined. And somewhere on Earth, human children were being born who would grow up to face those threats, just as their ancestors had faced lions and ice ages and the endless darkness of space. The cycle continued. It would always continue, because that was what humans did. They survived. 5 years passed. The Galactic Academy Station was rebuilt, stronger than before. The new training program based on Terran combat doctrine became one of the most prestigious courses in the galaxy, attracting warriors from every corner of known space. Marcus Chen rose through the ranks quickly. His actions during the Battle of the Academy became legendary, studied in military schools and whispered about in barracks across 1,000 worlds. But Marcus himself never spoke of it unless directly asked. He preferred to focus on the future, on preparing the next generation of warriors for the fights to come. He was teaching a class on survival psychology when the message arrived. An ensign interrupted his lecture to hand him a sealed communication device, and Marcus knew immediately that something had changed. He dismissed his students early and found a private room to open the message. Commander Vreltosh appeared on screen, older now but still sharp. "Marcus," she said without preamble, "the Void Speakers have returned, but not the way we expected." "Explain," Marcus replied, his body already shifting into combat readiness. "They have not come with weapons. They have come with an embassy. They want to talk." For a long moment, Marcus did not know what to say. This was not something his training had prepared him for. After centuries of hatred and 5 years of waiting for the inevitable attack, the enemy was seeking peace. "There is more," Vreltosh continued. "They have specifically requested to speak with you. They say they have learned something about the Terrans that changed their understanding of your species. They want to share it with you." Marcus thought about his grandfather's stories. He thought about the battles his ancestors had fought, the prices they had paid. He thought about the enemy soldiers he had killed in that corridor 5 years ago, and the emptiness he had felt afterward. "I will go," he said. The meeting took place on a neutral station at the edge of explored space. Marcus arrived with a small honor guard, though he suspected weapons would be useless if the Void Speakers had planned a trap. He wore his dress uniform, the one with the medal he had received for defending the academy. The Void Speaker delegation was waiting in a conference room. There were 5 of them, their pale faces and empty eyes just as unsettling as Marcus remembered. But something was different. They carried no weapons that he could see, and their posture suggested wariness rather than aggression. One of them stepped forward. It was the same creature who had demanded Marcus's surrender 5 years ago. "Terran Marcus Chen," the creature said, "I am Speaker Prime Voreth. I have traveled far to speak with you." "You traveled far once before," Marcus replied. "You threatened to destroy thousands of lives to capture me. Why should I believe you come in peace now?" Voreth made a gesture that might have been the equivalent of a nod. "Because in the years since our last meeting, I have studied your species. I have read your histories. I have learned things that my predecessors did not know when they chose to make war against your people." The Void Speaker sat down at the conference table and gestured for Marcus to do the same. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus took the seat across from him. "Tell me what you have learned," Marcus said. Voreth was silent for a long moment, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke. "When the Void Speakers first encountered your species, we saw predators, destroyers, creatures who swept across the stars with fire and death, taking what they wanted without mercy. We fought against you because we believed you would eventually come for us regardless. Better to strike first, we thought, than to wait for the inevitable. We only attacked your people after you attacked our colony," Marcus said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Voreth admitted. "We struck first, and you struck back with a ferocity that nearly ended our entire civilization. For centuries, we have hated you for that. We have dreamed of revenge, of watching your worlds burn as ours did." He paused, his empty eyes fixed on Marcus's face. "But then I watched the recording from the Academy station. I watched you fight alone against dozens of my soldiers, and I saw something I did not expect." "What did you see?" "Fear," Voreth said. "Not in your actions, but in your eyes. In the moments between kills when you thought no one was watching. You were terrified, Marcus Chen, but you kept fighting anyway." Marcus felt something cold move through his chest. He had not known that anyone had noticed. "After that," Voreth continued, "I began to research the history of your species more carefully. I read about your evolution on that death world you call home. I read about the predators that hunted you, the disasters that should have wiped you out. And I realized something important." He leaned forward, And for the first time, Marcus saw something other than hatred in those black eyes. "You are not predators," Vorith said. "You are prey. Prey who learned to fight back. Prey who became so good at survival that the rest of the galaxy mistook you for hunters. But inside, you are still the terrified creatures who once huddled in caves, waiting for the night to end." Marcus said nothing. He could not find words. "That is why you fight the way you do," Vorith continued. "Not because you love violence or crave conquest, but because you are afraid. You have always been afraid, and that fear drives you to fight harder than any predator ever could." The Void Speaker sat back in his chair. "When I understood this, my hatred began to fade. How can I hate a species for doing what we have all done, for fighting to survive against impossible odds? The difference is that you succeeded where so many others failed." Marcus finally found his voice. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want peace," Vorith said simply. "My people have spent centuries preparing for a war of revenge, but I have realized that such a war would only prove what I now know to be true. We would attack, and you would fight back with the desperation of cornered animals, and in the end one of our species would be destroyed, perhaps both." He extended one thin hand across the table. "I would rather find another way. I would rather let the old hatred die and build something new. Is that possible, Marcus Chen? Can the prey who learn to fight and the hunters who learn to fear find common ground?" Marcus looked at the offered hand. He thought about everything he had been taught, everything he believed about himself and his species. The fury and the terror, the determination and the desperation. The knowledge that humans had never been given anything. They had fought for every breath, every generation, every step forward. And he realized something that surprised him. He was tired of fighting. Not because he was weak or afraid, but because fighting was only one part of what made humans special. They also knew how to adapt, to change, to recognize when the old ways were no longer necessary. His ancestors had been prey animals who became the most dangerous species on their planet. Perhaps it was time for the next evolution. Perhaps it was time to become something more than survivors. Marcus reached out and took Vorith's hand. "Let us find out," he said. The treaty negotiations lasted months, but in the end, they succeeded. The Void Speakers joined the Galactic Council as a probationary member, and Marcus was appointed as the first ambassador between their species. Years later, historians would point to that moment as a turning point in galactic history. The day when humanity showed that it could do more than fight, that the cornered animal instinct that had driven them to the stars could be channeled into something other than violence. But Marcus knew the truth was simpler than that. Humans had always been survivors, and survival sometimes meant knowing when to stop fighting and start building. He kept the memorial medal from the Academy battle on his desk as a reminder of what humans could do when pushed to their limits, and a reminder of why it was important to find ways to avoid pushing anyone that far. The cornered animal was still there, inside every human. It would always be there, but now they had a choice about when to let it out. That, Marcus thought, was the real victory, not over the Void Speakers or any other enemy. Over themselves. And somehow, that felt like the most human accomplishment of all.